Commerce. We have a lot of people that we want to be able to hear from today and ask questions of and make the most of our time. We are going to have a hearing on Senate Bill 361, which concerns an employer's maximum liability for permanent total disability compensation. And we will start with an overview of the bill from our reviser, Charles. So we will open the hearing with Charles. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Senate Bill 361 amends workers' compensation law with respect to benefits for workers who have been permanently totally disabled by changing the current cap on such benefits. Permanent total disability exists when the employee, on account of the injury, has been rendered completely and permanently incapable of engaging in any type of substantial and gainful employment. That definition is 44510C. Under current law, KSA 44510F limits the maximum amount of benefits that may be received in a lifetime for permanent total disability to $155,000. This amount also includes any other benefits that may have been received by the injured worker under other categories of disability benefits, such as temporary total disability, temporary partial disability, and permanent partial disability. The bill would replace a $155,000 cap with a maximum benefit of, quote, the employee's average weekly wage in effect on the date of injury for which compensation is being made, starting from the date of maximum medical improvement and continuing for the lifetime of the employee for the duration of such disability. That's at Senate Bill 361, page 1, lines 14 to 18. If passed, this bill would become effective upon publication in the Kansas Register. That is what the bill does.
Thank you, Charles. Questions for the reviser? Senator Holland.
Madam Chair, I just had a question about how you're going to manage the thing today, because I have some technical questions, but I don't know if that's more appropriate to some of the conferees or maybe a data request to Charles and or legislative research. How do you want to approach that?
Depends on the nature of your request. If you have specific request of staff, you may do that when you feel it's appropriate, now or at the end. Okay,
I'll make it. I'll make it at the end if I don't have my questions answered before then. Thank you.
Okay, committee, next we have with us John Yeary, Jennifer Flory, and Mike Michael from the State Employee Health Benefits Plan, and we're going to have Mike talk to us briefly about the fiscal note with this because there's some unique aspects of it. So welcome to the committee, Mike.
Good morning, Madam Chair, committee members. Mike Michael, I'm the Deputy Director for the State Employee Health Benefits Plan, and work comp falls under our agency. And questions on the fiscal note, would you like for me to kind of walk through how we put that together?
Would you please understand there's some unique aspects of it that will be helpful for the committee to understand?
Sure. So some of the assumptions that we used on the bill, that it would include our current individuals that are receiving permanent total disability versus future forward when the bill was passed and published in the Kansas Register. And we currently have 53 individuals that are receiving permanent total disability. Currently under work comp, there's a cap for an individual's gross average weekly wage, which is 66 2/3 of that. So if an individual's wage calculates above that weekly maximum that's set by the state, then it drops to that. Currently, I believe that's $737. So if somebody's gross average weekly wage was $1,000, they would be capped at $737. If that gross average weekly wage calculated out to be $500, and they'd receive the $500. And so it looked like that was removed, and it would just be based upon the employee's gross average weekly wage at the time of their accident. And then we made the assumption that the law would become effective after published in the Register, which we calculated at July 1 of '22, which would take us into a full FY '23 year. So with those movements, based upon the 53 individuals that we currently have, that's where we went back and then recalculated what that difference would be versus what we would continue to pay out under the bill, and that's where I think you have the, what was that, for FY '23, you had the 924, 490.
Yes, Senator Dole.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Of these 33 that are permanently disabled now, once they hit Social Security age, they don't get the disability, correct?
I believe there's an offset allowed for that.
Okay.
Other questions? Senator Dietrich.
Thank you. To follow up on that exchange, I thought Social Security would give you Social Security disability. Are you saying there's something beyond that?
I know that the work comp, and I think you may have some individuals here from the Division of Work Comp, but I believe there's some type of offset there.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Holland.
Thank you. So you're speaking to the corrected fiscal note here?
Correct.
Okay, and just so I understand, okay, so basically what you're saying is that out of the total, how many total, I'm curious, let's dive into this. How many work comp cases do you have a year, or how does your total work comp population relate to the 53 and the 924,000? Can you give me some background on that?
Yeah, the 53 individuals, some of those injuries go clear back to the early 2000s and then to current.
Sir, what I'm talking about is this is 53 that are on PTD, right?
Currently,
Told
yes.
us. Okay. Is that for the year currently? That's how many you have on? I guess what I'm trying to get a sense of is this is 53 people who have PTD. What are the total work comp claims for state employees?
Right. And that 53 would go back, clear back in time and carry forward. We see in our office between 2,000 and 3,000 work comp claims a year. We have projected with the law. Currently, we see around 2 new permanent total disability claims per year.
Okay, so what I'm looking for, sir, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. What I'm looking for, sir, is that 53, is that for fiscal year 22? Is that for calendar year 22? What is that?
That would be individuals that have been injured on the job, were deemed to be permanently totally disabled, and some of those dates of injuries on those claims go back into the 2000s. So that's everybody that would be on the current rolls.
Madam Chair, can I continue? So what I'm asking for, sir, is what were your total work comp claims, not just PTD, and I want to have it for the similar time frame. I want to know what your total dollars expenditures for those claims were. Okay? I'm trying to get a sense of, if we go this route,
Okay.
what is the additional burden, not just to the state? I want to know what it is to industry. I'm trying to come up with some metrics. Does that make sense?
Yes. I don't know that number
Okay.
right here, but we can get that
Know
for you.
that number and not ROMs. I need to know specifically how many cases, what you currently pay. That will help me put this in perspective. Thank you,
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Okay, any other questions or requests for Mike? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, committee, we will now move to our proponent testimony. We are going to move John Nave. So we will start with Jeff King from Workers' Compensation Director, Kansas Department of Labor. And so that we have time for testimony and questions, we are going to limit each conferee to 3 minutes. Welcome to the committee, Jeff.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jeff King. I'm the Director of the Division of Workers' Compensation for the past 3 years. Prior to that, I was in private practice in Salina, Kansas for roughly 38 years. So I'm I am here as a proponent of Senate Bill 361. This is a bill intended to address work comp benefits for permanent total disability. And as I think they read, permanent total disability is to address some of the most seriously injured workers in our system. These are workers that have been injured to the extent they can't return to any substantial gainful employment. The current cap, as was mentioned, is $155,000. In a 2019 Workers' Compensation Research Institute, Inc. publication, it indicated Kansas has the lowest cap on permanent total benefits in the nation. And at the current maximum compensation rate of $737 a week, a worker who's determined to be permanently totally disabled would get benefits for approximately 4 years, and then they're done. If you're a lower paid worker and don't reach that 737 max, it might be a little longer, might be 4, 5, 6 years. But at any rate, it's probably, most of these are paid out within 5 to 6 years. You're done and you get nothing further other than your medical from the workers' compensation system. And you're not only losing the benefits, but you've also lost your health insurance. You've lost retirement benefits that your employer, that you may have been contributing, your employer contributing. And these claims affect family members. And you'll hear that today, and I'll try to keep mine short because I do want to leave plenty of time for other people. But this takes a toll on not only the worker, but the family. This $155,000 cap is simply not adequate for injured workers that are unable to return to any kind of work for the rest of their lives. A majority of states have no cap on permanent total disability. Of states surrounding Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, and Colorado will pay benefits for the length of the disability, or which may be for life. Oklahoma does have a 15-year limit, or upon reaching Social Security retirement age, whichever is longer. The division does not, I know there's some questions about how many, and saying the division doesn't really track permanent total claims. I did ask our analysts to try to run a program to see how many permanent total awards were issued by our judges for 2020 and 2021, and they could only find 5. I'm not saying that's all there were. I'm sure there's some cases that were settled for permanent total because the amount is so low that, these cases get settled. The amount is so inadequate.
Mr. King, I'm sorry, your time has expired. Appreciate your testimony. Do you have a concluding?
Well, I didn't know if the Senator would like some explanation on the Social Security real quick,
Certainly, if you would.
Okay. And just to explain real quick to you, Social Security disability, if you get on that because you're unable to work, Social Security disability takes an offset for work comp benefits you receive. So if you get in work comp, you probably won't get the Social Security disability benefit. At age 65, that automatically, Social Security disability switches over to Social Security retirement. At that point, then the work comp benefits, the work comp carrier gets an offset for Social Security retirement. It's just the opposite, but there's an offset, so you end up losing one of the benefits one way or the other. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. And will you be able to stand for questions at the end of proponent testimony? Thank you. Committee, next we have Jan Fisher, registered lobbyist for state AFL-CIO. Welcome to the committee, Jan.
I just want to speak briefly because I think really we want to spend time on the people that are actually affected by this bill. I'd like to just address a couple of things that Senator Holland brought up. How many cases of permanent total disability are we talking about? As Mr. King indicated, as Director King indicates, we don't keep those numbers in Kansas, but the NCCI keeps it nationally. Those numbers are published annually by a group of social scientists. And if you dig down into the weeds, you'll find out that nationally, it's a little less than 0.25% of all indemnity claims involve permanent and total disability. So we're really talking about very, very few people. The other thing I'd like to comment on is some of the wording in the statute, the bill. I think that the intent of the bill was that it would be consistent with our statute that's KSA 44510C. And 44510C says that you get 2/3 of your average weekly wage up to a statutory maximum of $737. Now, if the language is a little clumsy so that there's a question about whether you get the full wage or you get 2/3 of the wage, obviously that can easily be fixed. And that would address some of the fiscal concerns in the note. The other thing that I would note for you is that the law only applies prospectively because it's a substantive change in the law. It would not affect the 53 current cases that the fiscal note addresses. And it's not going to increase the rate. The maximum that you can get is $737 per week. And a lot of people don't even get $737 because 2/3 of their wage isn't $737. So it doesn't affect the amount of compensation you get. It affects the length of compensation that a person would get. And so at $737 per week, $155,000 is gone in a little over 4 years. So it would stretch that out during the duration of the disability. There is an offset for Social Security, which has already been discussed, but there's also a method called review and modification, so that hopefully if someone does get better and they are able to go back to work through our system of review and modification, the disability benefits would also stop. And that's what most states do. They go the duration of the disability or for life, with some states offsetting for Social Security. So I would urge us to take care of our most catastrophically injured Kansans on par with all of our surrounding states. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jan, and what great timing, 5 seconds left. Impressive. Next, we have Philip Slape, Slape and Howard Law Firm. Welcome to the committee, Philip.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of committee. My name is Philip Slape. I'm an attorney in Wichita. I practice at the law firm of Slape and Howard. For 24 years, about half of my life, I've practiced in the area of workers' compensation. I'm here today in support of Senate Bill 361. It's a bill that's intended to fix a problem with permanent total disability benefits. Workers' compensation is a compromise between employers and employees. It's a 110-year-old law. In exchange for employers providing benefits to injured workers, in exchange the workers give up their right to sue in court. I think there's a little bit of a misconception. Sometimes people think that a worker can sue an employer if there's gross negligence or something of that nature. Workers' comp is a mandatory benefit. So workers have no choice but to get into the system and get compensation through that. I'm a product of a work comp system. As a child, my father was injured. I remember being in a situation of surviving on very little. It's very personal to me. My father was able to go back to school and earn his degree, and continue working. But as you see here today, some folks don't have that option. They don't have the ability to go back to work. I want to talk a little bit about the figures that we've heard today and put some real life perspective on that. With workers' comp, obviously we deal with figures. That's something that we have to talk about. $155,000 is woefully low because if you look back at the history of where this benefit was, in 1987 it was $125,000. In 35 years it has now increased to $155,000. If we ran those same numbers and we went back to 1987, that benefit rate should be at $425,000 right now. $425,000 would be a fair, I suppose, benefit rate at this point, but I think this bill is intended to fix the problem of it only increasing $30,000 in 35 years. I know the opponents to this bill will say that it'll increase premiums, it'll change things for the employer, but this $155,000 has to increase at some point in time. It's antiquated, it needs to be increased. I would ask you to listen to the testimony of the victims that are up here and how it affects their life, and I would ask you to pass this bill. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Philip. Next, we have Brian Wilhite from Wichita, Kansas. Brian, welcome to our committee.
Thank you. My name is Brian Wilhite. I'm testifying today that you passed Senate Bill 361. Had Senate Bill 361 been in a law, it would have made a difference for me after I was injured at my job as a charge nurse at Ascension Via Christi in Wichita. Please pass Senate Bill 361 so that other Kansas nurses and workers don't have the same experience that I have had. First, I want you to know that I am not one who gets easily sidelined. I enlisted in the Army at the age of 19. I was medically retired after 23 years of service, and I immediately went back to school to become a nurse. I got my nursing license in 2014 after finishing my bachelor's degree at Newman University. I worked my way up to being a charge nurse on a medical surgical floor, which was then used as a respiratory step-down unit during the pandemic. Because of my on-the-job injury, I now am severely impaired. I've had to come to terms with the fact that I may never work in my field again, and that I might not work at all. My symptoms worsened to the point that I could not stand on my own, causing me to return to an emergency room on September 24th, 2020. During the height of the pandemic, I assisted with a patient that was unknown at the time to us, positive with COVID-19. We were not a COVID unit. I tested positive 2 weeks later. I ended up in the emergency room with difficulty breathing and a fever. My symptoms worsened to the point where I couldn't stand on my own. Sorry, I repeated myself a little bit there. I was put on a ventilator on October 3rd, 2020. I was put into a medically induced coma on October 4th. October 5th, I was placed on extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, ECMO, which is a heart-lung bypass machine. I remained in that state during and after my transfer to Oklahoma City for pulmonary care on October 15th. I remained on ventilator and in a coma until November 11th, when I was removed from the ventilator and given a tracheostomy and put on temporary dialysis. I was medically transferred back to Ascension Via Christi in Wichita and was kept at the facility until November 24th. My tracheostomy was removed on Thanksgiving Day, 2020, and I was admitted to the hospital for another 10 days because of kidney damage that's caused me to have unable to control my urination and my bowels. From September 24th to December 18th, I had spent over 8 weeks hospitalized, over 5 on a ventilator, and over 4 in a coma. Received a tracheostomy, and then lost control of my bowels and kidneys shut down, resulting in a second hospitalization. I was unable to move my legs or arms from severe deconditioning requiring extensive rehab. Today, 18 months after my diagnosis, I am still severely impaired by the injuries that were caused by my work injury. I had a retroperitoneal tear, which caused my kidney to float into my spine, which was a result of the ECMO and ventilator. I had received 42 units of transfused blood for blood loss. I had multiple deep vein thromboses, DVTs, requiring me to be placed on blood thinners. Because this has caused intense lower back pain, I am constantly short of breath, so much so that a short flight of stairs into my house causes me to lose my breath. I find it incredibly difficult to breathe without oxygen, which I must carry with me at all times. I must be careful not to stand up too fast because of the constant fear of blacking out, which has happened, resulting in another hospitalization. I have difficulty swallowing, severe acid reflux, difficulty sleeping, and an on-again, off-again relationship with a Foley catheter. If you don't know what one of those is, I assure you it is not pleasant. When I found out that Kansas was the lowest cap in the nation, and the lowest by over $70,000, I was horrified, disgusted, and scared. I have no idea how that number is supposed to account for the inability to ever work again. It is simply shameful that Kansas is so far behind. Please pass Senate Bill 361. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, for your service and for being here today and your testimony.
Thank you.
Committee, next we have Jeff Cooper, Kansas Trial Lawyers Association. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm here today on behalf of the Kansas Trial Lawyers Association and workers across the state of Kansas in support of Senate Bill 361. It's our position that Kansas workers deserve the best, not the worst, which is what they're currently receiving in permanent total disability benefits. Most of what I have in my written testimony has already been said today, and I don't want to take up much time. A couple points I did want to make, however. It doesn't matter if you're 25 years old or 65 years old, the cap is $155,000. If you're a fairly high wage earner where your wage is high enough that you qualify for the maximum rate of $737, so you'd have to earn at least $1,106 a week in your regular paycheck, gross wages, to qualify for the $737. Okay, so if you're hurt on the job so bad you can't go back to work, and you were making at least $1,100 a month, $1,106 actually, you would get $737 a week until those benefits run out. So kind of a timeline: $1,106, and then you're hurt and you can't work, $737. You're already losing 2/3 of your wages. If you're higher than that, you're losing more than 2/3, or losing more than a third, I should say. But then 4 years goes by, $737, and you can't ever work again. Those benefits stop. There's nothing. We don't provide any assistance for workers that are hurt so bad here in the state of Kansas that they can never work. One other point I'd like to make too is I kind of disagree with the projection of costs on this bill. First of all, anybody that's receiving benefits now, including several of the witnesses here today, they won't see any benefit from this. It will all be set based on the date of the injury. So I would submit that for the state self-insurance fund, there will be zero cost on any permanent total disabilities for 3 years, because that's about how long it takes to get a case through the court system on a permanent total disability. After that, yeah, there will be increases depending on the age of the individual, but it's our position that workers here in the state of Kansas should be treated fairly, and right now they are not. I have some more, but I want to yield my time to the people who are really affected by the injury. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. Next, we have Anita Miller from Topeka, Kansas. Welcome, Anita.
I'm Anita Miller, and I'm from Topeka, Kansas, and I'm represented by State District 18. I was employed by the Siemens School District. I had worked there for over 10 years, following volunteering there at the school and having my sons go through the school. I was passionate about my work, working with special ed children. Part of my work that I did was working with disabled children that were physically disabled. The point at which I received my injury, I was lifting a child out of a wheelchair. The burning sensation started that day and didn't quit. I ended up having to have a anterior cervical discectomy and fusion on 2 different levels. The surgery did not work. The nerves were damaged, and I continued to have the severe nerve pain. I have tried to work with the insurance company to get other procedures done to help with it. It takes a very, very long time to go through with working with the insurance company. I was referred over 6 months ago, last summer, for another procedure, and I didn't get it until January the 26th. I have a follow-up appointment 4 weeks later, and they still have not approved it because of the system. Also, I was awarded my award after 3 years. And they also took it to an appeals court because they said that I was not permanently disabled from my work. It affects me daily because if I look down for too long, look to the side, sitting, walking, reaching out, and in my job, it was a lot of bending, sitting on the floor, crawling with little ones. So I am not able to do those things without having to resort to bed rest, ice packs, an H-wave device, multitude of self-care that I've tried over the years. I now get massage every week to try and help with the muscle spasms, and that gives me some relief, but it's a daily struggle. I am very disappointed that Kansas is limited to only $155,000. Even at my age, I would have been able to earn at least 3 times that, even as a low para wage that and the school system, I still would have earned at least 3 times that. It's just very discouraging, and my heart hurts for the people who are younger than me who really rely on that money to survive. And I just ask that you would approve this bill, 361. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anita. Next, we have Jennifer Young from Wichita, Kansas. Welcome, Jennifer.
Welcome. My name is Jennifer Young. I live in Wichita in Senate District 30. I was injured in June of 2017 by a patient working as a radiology technologist in Wichita. I broke 3 ribs and separated them from my sternum. I also injured my head, which required immediate brain surgery. That surgery failed, and I'm now needing a shunt surgery. As a result of this injury, I am now permanently and totally unable to work. I suffer from constant, unrelenting pain in my head, my neck, and my chest. I have constant headaches and frequent migraines, all which affect my cognitive ability as well as my speech. I was in my mid-30s when this injury happened, and I had just given birth to my son. While I was in college, I played golf on a golf scholarship. Golf's completely out of the question for me now. Before this injury, I had a career that had a yearly salary of approximately $80,000. In 2 years, I could have earned more than that, than the maximum allowed under the Kansas Workers' Compensation law for permanent total disability of $155,000. Ms. Erickson, I know you're from Kansas or Wichita, and the area that I come from. I sent you a letter detailing my personal struggle with this workers' compensation system in Kansas. In that letter, I offered to meet with you in person. I also offered to introduce you to my son and my husband so you could hear how my workers' compensation case has, how it's also affected them. It affects the family as a unit. Unfortunately, my letter went unnoticed, just like I've gone unnoticed for the past 5 years now. So I brought pictures of my son today so you could see him. As a mom, I'm sure you can imagine the heartbreak I must feel every single day when I have to tell him, I can't pick you up. I can't take you to the park. I can't do mom and son activities with you. Senator Erickson, I also read an article where you said, you and Senator Tarwater said workers' compensation changes are not a priority. I'm standing here before you today from District 30, and as somebody who voted for you, begging you to make me and every single injured worker who follows behind me a priority. This bill will not impact me in any way. I don't want to see anybody that follows behind me in my footsteps to have to experience what I've gone through. I drove all the way from Wichita this morning to be in front of you guys today. This is how important this is. I'm begging you to please pass Senate Bill 361, and I will stand for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Next, we have Chris Jacobson. I believe Keith Mark will provide the verbal comment. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and the rest of this committee. And as Chris and his wife Melinda come up here, I'm actually, a bit shook, and I'm humbled by what I've heard today. I've been practicing workers' compensation for, I didn't want to tell you how long, because I hope you think I look younger than what I am. And I'm going to apologize right now because I'm not going to do this story justice. But Chris asked me to read this on his behalf. My name is Chris Jacobson, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to tell you my story. Back in 2014, I was employed by Darling International. I was a truck driver. It was a normal morning on August 13, 2014, when I left for work. I kissed my wife, Melinda, and my son, Damien, goodbye, and I went to work. Unfortunately, there was nothing normal about that day. In fact, on August 13, 2014, the Jacobsons' families' lives were shattered forever. During that workday on August 13, 2014, I was involved in a rollover truck accident. I broke my neck. I was paralyzed from the neck down and suffered many more injuries. I haven't been able to use my arms or my legs since that day. I have internal organ damage. I have a catheter. I went from being the sole breadwinner of my family to not being able to take care of myself. I worked in Kansas, and with the help of my attorney, I started receiving Kansas workers' compensation benefits. My average weekly wage at the time of my accident was agreed to be $1,063, yet my workers' compensation check was only $594 per week. That was barely 1/2 of my weekly salary, and my attorney told me that what I was receiving was the maximum amount allowed by law, even if it wasn't fair or adequate. I went through a lot of treatment, and my medical bills were over $3 million. Then it came time for me to be compensated for my permanent injuries. The judge told me what I already knew. I was permanently and totally disabled from ever working again. On March 22, 2018, the judge awarded me the maximum amount of money that Kansas allows for individuals like myself who are permanently and totally disabled for the rest of their lives. A grand total of $155,000. Now, as I'd been getting that whopping $594 per week since my accident, they subtracted that money from my award. I'd been completely disabled for over three and a half years at that point, so they subtracted $111,000 from the $155,000 that I was awarded, which left me an additional $45,000 in benefits for the rest of my life. At $594 per week, that money ran out in August of 2019. Yet here I sit, still chained to this chair. I still can't work. I still can't hug my wife or my son. I can't even get my own drink of water or shoo a fly off my nose. Sadly, I'm not even capable of reading this out loud to you because of the lack of my lung capacity. Both lawyers and the judge told me that $155,000 was all I was entitled to in this case. And they told me that it was you folks who decided there should be a cap on lifetime disability benefits and that $155,000 was a fair amount. Hearing my story, I hope you will rethink the fairness of that cap. Fortunately for me, my lawyer proved I was entitled to Missouri workers' compensation benefits, and after that, I started receiving $709 per week. And that extra money per week was awesome, but the real blessing was that Missouri workers' compensation didn't cap permanent and total disability benefits. That meant I was paid all the way back to 2019 when my Kansas benefits stopped, and I'm still getting that check, and I'll get it until the day I die. It's not what I was making. It doesn't take into consideration the raises I would have gotten, and it certainly won't keep up with the rising inflation in Joe Biden's America. But it's a far sight better than absolutely nothing, which I would have been receiving since August of 19 in Kansas. Although I'm happy for myself that by the grace of God I qualified for Missouri workers' compensation benefits, my heart aches for those who suffer like I do and are only entitled to Kansas workers' compensation benefits. I'm here to tell you that this cap is not only unfair, it's inhumane. And I'm here to beg you, and I mean it when I tell you that if I could get out of this chair and get on my knees and beg you to fix this injustice, I would. But all of you can still get on your knees. So tonight, when you get on your knees in prayer, ask God to give you the courage to do what you already know is the right thing to do and eliminate this unconscionable cap on permanent total disability benefits. Chris Jacobson.
Thank you for your testimony, Chris and Keith, for sharing that with us. Committee, next we have Jake Miller, Executive Director, Working Kansas Alliance. Welcome, Jake.
Madam Chair, committee members, Jake Miller, Executive Director, Working Kansas Alliance. For those of you who don't know, Working Kansas Alliance represents over 250,000 workers across the state, and I have appeared before you many times. I won't do this bill justice as much as the victims will, so I'm going to highlight some points that opponents have raised in their testimony that we see in constantly the same opponents against these workers' compensation bills. First is the chamber and all Sherm and every other opponent raises that this will increase 210% for PTD disability claims, or the rate. They'll be 210% higher. I think that number right there shows you how low the number is today. $155,000 for an individual's life is too low. Most of these individuals probably made that in a span of 2 years, and we're going to try to break that out over an entire lifespan for them. Further, I was baffled by reading the opponent testimony on some of these. The Kansas Self-Insurers Association says that this is a reason for workers to not return to work. That's literally what they say is their number one, I think it's number 3 of 3 prongs of why you all should not pass this bill. These are permanently, totally disabled individuals. They can't return to work. Not at any fault of their own, but at the fault of their job and what they did in their work. So for opponents to testify that this is a way for individuals to not want to return to work and another way to stay off work is baffling to me, because the definition in the bill, in the statute, and everything is permanently and totally disabled. To me, that's self-explanatory. Someone can't choose to not work. I'm pretty sure that if we asked any one of these victims up here today, they would want to return to work the way they would before they were injured. Further, my last point is going to be that all of the opponents testify that this is a way for attorneys to make more money, because that's always the shot of how we're going to stop workers' compensation reform in Kansas. Attorneys are going to try to make more money. That's just not true. I mean, there is a statutory 25% awarded in workers' compensation claims for attorneys in Kansas. Sure, the cap is going to be raised. The cap is already too low, so we're working to try to raise that. I will leave it at that now. I just wanted to highlight some of those points. I will tell you that opponents to this bill are always afraid of what amendments will hit the floor if a bill like this hits the floor on workers' compensation. I will tell you right now, as the Working Kansas Alliance, we will not push for any amendments to this bill. We want this bill to come out clean. We want this bill to run. This bill is a much-needed bill, and it's way too important to play games with. So we ask you for your support, and I will stand for any questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. And finally, committee, on the proponents, we have John Nabe, Executive Vice President, Kansas AFL-CIO. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak before you in support of SB 361. You've all heard some compelling testimony from people around the state and their caretakers. You know, injured workers want some dignity while they work to improve their health to go back to work, or have some level of quality of life throughout their remaining life, resulting from being severely injured. Senate Bill 361 addresses compensation for workers who are injured so severely that they may never go back to work. As you've heard in earlier testimony, Kansas law limits compensation at a maximum of $155,000. We've heard that. Clearly, that's not enough to sustain until the age of 65 when they receive Social Security, and it all switches and changes. The states at border, we've heard that testimony. Iowa, Nebraska, Colorado, Missouri, and Oklahoma have a better workers' compensation system than Kansas. And it's time that we look at this. Average, we take their wages, minimum wage is $7.25, if I stand correct, $15 an hour, or even $20 an hour or more. You know, working families have rent, they have mortgages, they take care of their family, they buy groceries. Fact is, they put money right back into the community. The last 2 years, and I'll be briefing and be finished, were very hard on the citizens of Kansas. One might say devastating due to the pandemic health crisis across the state and across the country. Many were laid off and let go. You did something last year, all of you did. You came together. The unemployment system was outdated and needed fixed. Many of you heard personal stories of severe hardships. What you all pledged to do was to fix the system. You did. You agreed, you disagreed, but you did it. You fixed the system. Now is the time to fix the workers' compensation system and bring it up to par with our neighboring states. And as you heard the testimony of these here today, take that into account. Come together, adjust the language in the bill, and bring it to the floor. I stand for any questions, and thank you for allowing me the time to speak.
Thank you so much. Committee, we do have opponent written only testimony from Eric Stafford, from the Kansas Chamber, Dan Murray, from the National Federation of Independent Businesses, Tony Anderson from Kansas Self-Insurers Association, and Natalie Bright on behalf of Kansas Society for Human Resource Management. With that, committee, I will open it up for questions after a brief comment. As in testimony, I was singled out by a conferee, and I would like to let that conferee know that I am sincerely sorry, as hard as I do try to meet the needs of every constituent I serve, I fall short. And for that, I'm sincerely sorry. I hope I will get the opportunity to visit with you and make that up. As to the article, I do not remember saying that. I hope, as evidenced by my decision to have this hearing today, that it will reiterate how important this issue is to me. So I am sincerely sorry, Jennifer. With that, committee, I will open it up for questions. Senator Holland.
Madam Chair, I have a number of questions. Do we know why none of the opposition showed up to testify against the bill? Are they just ashamed or what?
Well, I think that was probably
It's
a
rhetorical question.
A rhetorical question. So do you have any other questions, Senator Holland?
Yes, I do. I actually want to thank Jake Miller. I've read now the Tony Anderson from the Kansas Self-Insured Association. I just want to draw the committee's attention to the bottom paragraph, Madam Chair, as we debate this stuff. He says, changing this benefit model is not good policy. If adopted, SB 361 would require payment to injured workers an amount greater they earned working. This then incentivizes injured workers to not return to work, as they can make more from staying off work than they can working. This drives me nuts about the legislature, and I am going to get off on this just a little bit, okay? It's like anybody gets hurt on the job, the assumption is you're lazy, you're shiftless, okay? And I go further, just to remind Mr. Anderson himself, the last time I noticed is that when you get injured, you go to the company's doctor. You go to their doctor, and they tell you that you have PTD. So this bothers me. I would like to get a little bit of question about NCCI. I don't know if any of the proponents here can talk about NCCI. I do have some questions about the technical data. Can anybody talk about NCCI? Okay, I'll take that off. Yes, sir.
Would you please, yes, if you would please come to the microphone, and Jeff, if you could just restate your name for the record, please, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name's Jeff King. I'm the Director of the Division of Workers' Compensation. NCCI did do some analysis of Senate Bill 164, which was the same as Senate Bill 361, but last year, and it didn't get a hearing, is my understanding. There is some obviously increase premium that may be a result from the increase in the cap.
Okay, but here's my question, sir. Can I proceed, Madam Chair, with some questions? Okay, my question is this. NCCI talks about they have data. I assume this is across the entire country, right? This is all the states lumped together.
It is as far as the number of claims and things like that. I believe it was like 1 or 2% of claims result in perm total, a very small number.
Do they have any data that talks about Kansas only?
There is some data that talks about Kansas only in terms of what the impact of the premium and that kind of thing, yes. I mean, the premium dollars paid in Kansas for 2020 were $376 million, and they determined if the cap on weekly benefits still applies, it affects the claims or the premium by about 1.4%.
So, sir, I guess and I'll cut to the chase, and I have a data request, and I will stand down. I guess what I want to say is that it bothers me that we have opposition not here to take questions about NCCI data. And I'm just trying to figure out who is NCCI. Are they truly independent? Are they basically funded by the insurance industry and all their actuaries are pinching pennies? I'd like to know more about that organization. I'd like to know more about the data set you have as far as Kansas and its entirety was to PTD as well as the nation. And then I do have a data request for you, sir.
Okay.
Are you in a position, because I don't think the chamber or SHRM's going to do it for me, but are you in a position, or who out there could give me a view of total claims in private industry, forget about the state now. I want to know total industry, I want to know claims, number of claims, number of dollars being paid out. I want to know PTD claims current dollars being paid out. Okay. And I want to understand the delta in the cost between making, I guess, a request. What would be the fiscal delta in taking PTD from the current payment scheme to going to a lifetime, okay, or as an option consideration, maybe raising that $155,000 to $500,000? And I also asked this question to the proponents as well as the opponents, if there was ever any consideration of going to a lifetime cap, since we know businesses love certainty, would there be any discussion around going to a, say, $500,000 payout versus the 155 versus the lifetime? And so just, I will stand down with my questions, but that's just some research of somebody on the proponent side could talk about that, not now. Just, and finally, Madam Chair, I do want to thank you for hearing this bill, because to people in our audience, please understand, we are a non-exempt committee. Now, I know this came through Fed and State, so it is a non-exempt bill. But I do want to thank the chairwoman for holding this hearing, because she could have said, hey, we're done. And I think, I won't speak for their people on the board, but I mean, there are a number of people up here that truly know that this is an issue past due. We had injured workers from, Sprint, Aerospace or whatever down, I forget, but we are aware of this issue and we have sat on it. So I hope we can bring some relief to our injured workers. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the time.
Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you guys for your testimony. There was a gentleman that made the comment that all of you had set this legislation. I don't think that's correct. Well, I appreciate it, but I'd ask the revisers and research when the last time this was updated so that we can know for the record, because I have a feeling it's been quite a few years since this has been looked at.
I'm Keith.
No, I know who said it. I just,
Yeah, I'm
it's
Keith
breaking my
Mark.
heart and I'll tear up if I.
Yeah, I'm Keith Mark, and there were some revisions that I wanted to make to Mr. Jacobson's testimony to clean it up just a little bit, but then I felt it would be unfair to do that. You are correct. That is a generic statement with regard to me explaining to him that it was the legislature. But I think your comment is so pointed because it wasn't you guys, and it probably wasn't even your predecessors, and that's how outdated this is. But yes, I apologize if that is, don't take that personally. That was generically aimed at the legislature. I apologize, Senator Tyson.
Please don't apologize. What I was doing is using that to make a point that this hasn't been changed for so many years that it needs to be looked at.
Senator O'Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here for their stories. My question, I think, is for research. I think it would benefit the committee, but I was just curious if there's a percentage of Kansas companies that provide disability insurance that either offer it or offer the option of an employee to purchase it, and then the different kinds, right? So there's like long-term, permanent, versus more of a short term. I just was curious kind of what the current landscape was like outside of what the state's offering. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments, committee? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This question I'm going to guess would be for Mr. King. And I apologize, I got to committee a little bit late, Madam Chairman, so if this was mentioned, I will just learn on my own. In the legislation, it talks about the change in the dollar amount, and it says continuing for the lifetime of the employee. Help me understand, how does Social Security, when they turn 65, if this legislation passes, would they continue to receive the maximum 737 for their lifetime, or is it offset by Social Security income? Can you just help me understand that a little bit?
Currently, there is a provision for a retirement benefit and Social Security retirement benefit offset in KSA 44-501. And so when they start receiving retirement benefits, then the work comp carrier does get an offset. So if they're getting $500, $2,000 a month in Social Security, they get roughly $500 a week. The insurance carrier gets to set that off for their work comp benefits. If they're getting the max to 737, so they get reduced down to $237 plus their Social Security retirement benefits. So yes, there is an offset that applies once they start receiving retirement benefits.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So currently, it's capped at 155 maximum lifetime, correct? Yes. Okay. So they could start receiving Social Security or retirement income offset, which reduces amount, but then it would end when they reach, if they haven't already reached that cap, it would end when they reach that cap. And this would say there's no end, but if they're receiving Social Security in excess of $737 per week, they would not receive any.
They wouldn't get anything.
Okay.
From work comp, correct.
Thank you, Mr. King. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I want to thank everyone for being here today and for your testimony. Committee, we will not meet tomorrow, but we will on Thursday. And seeing no other business, we are adjourned.